The tribunal chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of crystalline architecture, built to house the judgment of gods. Today it would judge a human. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the defendant's sphere, surrounded by a shimmering force field that distorted her image into something almost spectral. Around her, arranged in concentric circles that spiraled upward into darkness, sat representatives from 473 galactic civilizations. The Vrex Dominion, whose fleets numbered in the millions. The Kashari Collective, whose minds moved as one across 1,000 worlds. The ancient Orium Empire, whose species had mastered faster than light travel when Earth's ancestors still swam in primordial oceans. All of them had come to witness humanity's fall. Supreme Arbiter Vecthorin's 12 eyes focused on the human, as his translator implant rendered his words into her barbaric tongue. Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Alliance, you stand accused of 412 counts of war crimes, including the unauthorized deployment of quantum cascade weapons, the orbital bombardment of 17 civilian stations, and the systematic elimination of the krill breeding worlds. Sarah said nothing. Her hands remained clasped behind her back, her spine straight despite 3 months in detention. The arbiter's mandibles clicked in what might have been satisfaction. How do you plead? Guilty, Sarah said quietly. A ripple of shock pulsed through the assembled species. The human had not fought, had not argued. The Vrex ambassador's tentacles writhed in confusion. The Kashari's collective mind stuttered with dissonance. You admit your crimes? Vecthorin's voice carried an edge of uncertainty. I do. Sarah's gaze swept across the thousands of beings watching her. I killed 17 billion krill. I reduced their breeding worlds to ash. I deployed weapons that violated 47 articles of the Galactic Conventions on Warfare. Then you will be sentenced to— But I demand, Sarah interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp as a blade, that this tribunal watch what happened before you pass judgment. The arbiter's eyes narrowed. The evidence has been reviewed. No, Sarah said. You reviewed tactical data, fleet movements, casualty reports. You didn't watch what the krill did to Proxima Colony. Silence fell across the chamber like a shroud. You didn't see, Sarah continued, her voice cracking now, what they did to 3 million human children. You didn't read the reports from New Johannesburg, where they kept our people alive in feeding pens for 6 months. You didn't hear the transmissions from the Ark ships, when those mothers realized the krill were breeding inside their children, using them as living incubators. The Kashari Collective's unified voice spoke. We do not need to see atrocities to understand law has been broken. Sarah laughed, and it was a terrible sound. You hypocritical bastards. You wrote your pretty laws after you'd already exterminated anyone who threatened you. The Vrex glassed 40 species before they joined your little club. The Orium Empire practices systematic genetic cleansing on every world they integrate. And the Kashari? Your unity is forced neural integration. You erase individual minds. This trial is not about— Vecthorin began. This trial, Sarah roared, is about one thing only. You're terrified because humanity won. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in 100 languages. Security drones moved toward the defendant's sphere. We were 3 colonies. Sarah's voice cut through the noise like a laser. 3 small colonies against the largest krill hive fleet in history. They had 5,000 ships. We had 73. They had been conquering the galaxy for 10 million years. We'd been in space for barely 3 centuries. She stepped forward until her face pressed against the force field, her eyes burning with something the assembled species had never quite seen before. And we won. Not because we're more advanced. Not because we have better technology. We won because when you push humanity to the edge of extinction, when you force us to choose between dying on our knees or fighting from hell itself, we will burn the galaxy down before we let our children die. Vecthorin's voice was quiet now. You speak as if this justifies— I'm not justifying anything, Sarah said. I told you I'm guilty. I broke your laws. I committed atrocities. I will carry the screams of those 17 billion krill for the rest of my life. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. But I'll carry them standing over the graves of 3 million human children who got to stay dead, instead of being worn as living suits by parasitic horrors. She straightened, her eyes dry now, glacially calm. So here's my statement for the record, Supreme Arbiter. Yes, I'm a war criminal, and if I had to do it again, if Earth itself stood on the edge of extinction, I would make the same choice. Every single Time. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Beck Thorin spoke. This tribunal finds Commander Sarah Chen guilty of all charges. He paused, his ancient eyes meeting her human ones. She is hereby sentenced to immediate release. The chamber exploded again, but Beck Thorin's amplified voice overrode all others. Every species in this chamber has faced its crucible. Every empire here was forged in the fire of impossible choices. We created our laws to prevent future atrocities, yes, but we also created them to ensure that species capable of such terrible resolve would never need to use it. His eyes swept across the assembled delegates. The Krill were not signatories to our conventions. They recognized no law but predation. They would have continued across the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. He looked back at Sarah. Commander Chen did what we all have done, what we all would do again if faced with the extinction of our species. She committed necessary evil in service of survival. Beck Thorin's voice grew harder, carrying an edge of warning. This tribunal declares that humanity's actions, while technically criminal, were committed under the doctrine of species preservation against an existential threat. More importantly, we declare this. Any species that forces humanity to make such a choice again will find themselves without the protection of these laws. He gestured, and the force field around Sarah dissolved. We do not kneel because humanity is righteous, Commander Chen. We kneel because you have proven that humanity, when threatened with extinction, becomes the thing that nightmares fear. Sarah Chen walked from that chamber a free woman. Behind her, 473 civilizations quietly updated their protocols. Next to humanity's entry, in letters visible across all their databases, appeared a single phrase that would echo across the galaxy for millennia. Do not threaten their young.